Welcome to the Boldest You podcast. I'm your host, Carrie, and I'm thrilled to bring you real conversations with bold women and men. In this podcast, we dive deep into their stories, exploring what drives their courage, shapes their vision, and fuels their desire to leave a lasting impact. These are honest, vulnerable, and inspiring moments that celebrate what it means to be bold. Let's discover their legacies together. Hello, listeners. This is your host, Carrie, and happy November. Over the past couple of months, you have been listening to episodes where people come and share their stories. This month, instead of bringing a guest to the podcast, I wanted to do something a little bit different and talk just me to you about your story. I think the concept of stories is so fascinating. We read books, we watch TV shows, we hear people's stories in the media, and these are things that we all relate to, and we take messages away from these stories. You've probably heard me talk on prior episodes. I run a program called the Bold Program. This is a program for college students, women to connect with a professional mentor, and together through sessions once a month, we dive into different concepts that help us build our character, our values, self esteem, self confidence, and self awareness. I love the content of the Bold program. And for our November session, something that we're talking about is the power of your story. So today, I thought we could talk about this together in the hopes that over the next couple months, you can start to think about your own story. Storytelling, as I said, is so powerful. It's why I started this podcast. I love sitting down with someone and learning about them through their story. I love learning about what they care about, what makes them unique, what makes them bold. As you've heard in the prior episodes, there is something for everyone. There's something that everyone has that they've had to go through that has made them bold. And oftentimes we discredit our own stories. We don't give ourselves the props that we should for the things that we have gone through and experienced. And we oftentimes don't take time to sit and reflect on what story we want the world to know about us. We know what we maybe should be telling people or what we should be posting on our social media accounts, or we should be doing all of these different things. And one of our previous guests, Kelsey Buell, has this phrase of don't should on yourself. Don't tell yourself what you should or shouldn't do. Think about really what you want. Think about what your dreams and desires are. And I think that that applies so well when it comes to the power of story. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was why is it important to tell our story? Think about a time when you have read a really powerful story. Like I said, maybe it was in a book, or maybe it was in a TV show or a movie that you love. You went to a presentation and someone shared their unique story. You watched a video or you saw something, heard their story. What did that story make you feel? Did it make you feel more connected to that person? Did you feel like you could relate to what they were talking about? Did it inspire you? Maybe their story was what caused you to try something new or to take a bold leap. Maybe it made you curious. It made you want to learn something about the world, about them, about a nonprofit that they work with, anything. Think about the past episodes that you maybe have listened to as a part of Bold. What are the things and the messages that you have taken away from each of those stories that have been shared? For me personally, for all of our prior guests, there's been something in every episode. I've been able to take away the message that we all have the same feelings. We're all insecure in certain ways. We all don't give ourselves the credit that we should. We all are just trying to navigate life as best we can. And I have felt so connected to the people that I have interviewed on this podcast. I have felt less alone. I have felt like I can relate to them. And we have built a really strong connection just through those hour-long conversations that we have. What about someone's story makes it powerful? What are those elements that really make us grab onto that story? I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is authenticity. When I listen to someone's story, I see who they are. When they really are able to let those walls down and tell the world about themselves, they are being so authentic. I think of, like I said, the past guests that I've had on this podcast. In each of those conversations, I have felt like I've gotten to know that person on an even deeper level, even though all of the guests that I've had so far are people that I've known fairly well. think the other side of it is that their stories are vulnerable. Even if it's a character that you're reading in a book or watching on a show, there's an element of vulnerability to their experiences and the willingness to talk about those experiences. You've heard me mention Brene Brown on this podcast a bajillion times, and I'm going to continue to talk about her because her work is so impactful. And something that she really highlights when talking about vulnerability is that shame, which is the opposite of vulnerability, hates to see a story coming. Shame wants us to feel excluded. It wants us to feel like we are the only person in the world who could ever experience something like that. But when we are open, when we are vulnerable, and we take a minute to talk about our stories or share that with someone else, we're allowing shame to take a back seat and creating connection. Connection is the antidote to shame. We have to be able to connect with someone, and a good way to do that is through sharing stories. The other thing that makes a story powerful is that it's not just about the moments in our life, but it's about the messages that we've taken from those moments. Again, I could say that I did something. Maybe I started this program or I did this. And while that's an amazing achievement, and that certainly is a part of my story, what do I want someone to take away from that when I tell that story? Maybe it's the fact that you can do anything you put your mind to. Or I think something we've talked about the message on this podcast so much is the importance of community. We are not supposed to go through life alone. We are supposed to do that with others. And when we have community backing us, we can do so much more than we thought we could. Each of our stories has moments that make up the messages that we want people to take away. And when I say we create that message, I don't want it to come off as we craft it to be perfectly in a box. We only are letting people see what we want to see. That's not authenticity or vulnerability. And I will say, I am someone who has really struggled with that concept. I want to present this image to the world that I have everything put together. I know what I'm doing. I have all the answers. And that's not realistic. I've done a lot of work in personal therapy to understand that as much as I want to do that, we can't, right? We have to let the world see us for who we are. And so it isn't about crafting our perfect story, it's about owning our experiences and really recognizing what about our story is important to share. And everything in your story has important moments at some point, right? But when we talk about what is our story, it really is the things that have made us who we are. I think the great place to start is your values. Your values are going to drive your story. For me personally, I have discovered through some different workshops and trainings that I have been in that my three core values are comfort, love, and stability. Living into these values, which is a practice I am working on every single day, allows me to show up in the relationships that I have. It allows me to be creative, both personally and professionally. It allows me to make decisions that feel right to me. And when I am making decisions for me, out of my values, that's going to have an impact on my life story. It's going to impact the things that I do with my time and my attention. Those values are the reason that volunteering is a part of my story, getting involved with organizations that I love passionately and giving back to my community. Those values are why my relationships in my life are so important to me and a big part of who I am, which makes up my story. Those values are why oftentimes making a hard decision is uncomfortable for me. I am someone who likes stability. I don't like discomfort, but knowing that is something that I can use to challenge myself personally. It can be the thing that helps me understand that I have to take risks and I have to find spaces where I am allowing myself to be more flexible. If you have never thought about your values or done anything to discover what your values are, there's a couple of things that I will tell you to start with. The first being you can go to Google and you can search free values assessment. And I believe it's the first one that comes up. And it is a quiz that will walk you through some different questions to help you really identify what your core values are. You can also go to Brene Brown's website. She's got a resource on there in her Dare to Lead section about values. It's a worksheet that you'll do to look at a bunch of words and start to narrow down the words that you find most important to you. The thing about values that Brene Brown talks about is that listing your values is one thing, but from there, you have to operationalize them. You have to determine what are those behaviors that you have come up with that either align with your values or are what she calls a slippery slope. This is a concept of you're going away from your values. And through this training that I've been doing recently, I have been able to do that with my own values. And as I wrote out these different behaviors and things that don't align with my values, it really made me think about my life story a little bit more and how my story has been crafted by moments where I was leaning into my values. When I think about my values of comfort, right? Some behaviors that align with comfort are taking rest when I need it. It's spending time with people in my life that I love truly. It's speaking to myself with gentleness and allowing for flexibility. Now, what does that have to do with my story? You heard me on the podcast last week talk about a moment of burnout. When I was in that space of burnout, I was living rigidly out of fear. I was ignoring the stress signals in my body. I was overcommitting myself. And I was really neglecting myself. I wasn't talking kindly to myself. I wasn't getting enough sleep. I wasn't nourishing myself. And yes, some of that did spark from having just too much on my plate, but I was ignoring that. I was walking away from the value of comfort and leaning into those toxic things that I thought were okay. That moment of admitting burnout is a big part of my story. That aligns with my value of comfort in the sense of it took realizing that I was out of line with my value to have that conversation. And that conversation brought me back to my value. And so there, I am living in my values. And that's a big moment in my story. As I think about other things like love, which I said is a second value of mine, that's where I'm thinking of all the moments in my story that relate to the communities that I'm in. My family is so important to me. I love spending time with my parents, my siblings, my nieces and nephews, my aunts and uncles, my grandmas, everything in my life around my family. And there are so many moments of my story that don't happen without putting that time and value into the people that I love. Similarly, in my friendships outside of my family, there are so many things that make up my story and who I am based off of the time and attention that I've put into those relationships. And even though my friends and I might live in different parts of the country or even be super close living together, but just not have the time to be together, it's the intentionality behind those relationships that has made up the parts of my story that relate to my relationships. Now, as you start to discover your values, they're not going to look the same as mine. Values are unique to each individual, and we get to decide what's important to us. We also get to decide what are those specific behaviors that bring us closer to our values or lead us further away. As you define those behaviors, as I said, I think you'll start to see what moments in your life relate to being in line with your values and maybe being out of line with your values. And it can help you decide how you want to go from here. What are the things that you want to challenge yourself to do? What are the spaces that you want to put yourself in? And those moments are going to continue to craft your story. Your story is never ending. It's a book that keeps being written. And you will take that into the next phase of whatever comes next for you. And so, with that, when you have your values defined, you're able to take those next steps very clearly. I wanted to give some examples of stories before we dive into crafting your own. As I have said on previous podcasts, I'm a big reader. One of my personal accomplishments was reading 56 books in 2024, and I'm striving to do that in 2025. I'm almost there. As a reader, one of my favorite series currently is the Empyrean series by Rebecca Yarros. The first book is called Fourth Wing. If you are not a reader, you probably haven't heard of this. If you are a reader, you likely have seen this series on Book Talk, Bookstagram, the internet. It's kind of in or it is in the fantasy realm, which became very popular during. Now, in this fantasy book, yes, there is magic and dragons and war and all these elements, but the female lead is named Violet Sorrengail. I'm on my fifth read of this series, and I read it for the first time 2.5 years ago. This series, I don't know what it is about it, but this story gets me. Every single time I read it, I feel something different. I catch on to a different part of this story. But the things that I think I enjoy about this story and the message that I take away from it is that at our core, we are so much stronger than we could ever know. Violet Sorrengail, the female lead in this book, is what most people define as weak. She is someone who is not strong when you first meet her in the first book. She's someone who thought she was going to be a scribe, which there's these different quadrants in this book. And she thought she was going to be a scribe, which is someone who records the world events. Think of it like a journalist. And instead, she goes into the riders quadrant, which is the dragon riders. They are the ones at battle and protecting the city because her mom forces her to. And because she is so weak, everyone expects her to not succeed. And you go through the story. I won't give out too many spoilers in case someone wants to go listen to it. She becomes one of the most powerful writers. She goes through many challenges to discover herself. And the second book, it's really about rediscovering who she is. And I really related to that part of the story of having to question everything you thought you knew about yourself or your surroundings. She's also said to represent chronic illness. The author, Rebecca Yarros, herself and her family members have a chronic illness. And so, while it's not specifically stated that the main character has this, the different elements of the story go to show that she could. And I think that these messages are so important that we are capable of more than we know. But the other element of this book that I really love is that message of community. There is nothing that Violet does in the book that she does not do completely on her own. There are moments in the book where she tries to do things on her own and it doesn't go well. And so she has to bring her community with her. I think that's something that is so important for us to remember. Now, maybe a more known example is Disney Pixar's Inside Out. This is a movie, there's a first and a second movie, and it is fantastic. It's an animated film based on the fictional character Riley Anderson. Riley in the first movie is in elementary school. In the second, she moves into being a teenager. And she goes through a phases of life changes. Her family moves from Minnesota to California. She has to change hockey teams. And the story is all about these emotions in her head. The emotions are characterized and given a persona. And we see most of the movie through the perspective of the emotions. What I love about this story is that it's giving the message that all emotions are valid and serve a purpose. We see things like joy, anger, sadness. As we get into the second film, you start to see things like anxiety. And you see how these emotions react to the different life circumstances that Riley's experiencing. What I took away from both of those movies is that emotions don't define who we are. We all are going to experience a variety of emotions. When we go through things in our life, emotions are normal, and we should create a space where we're allowed to show those emotions. But because they don't define us, we do have to navigate them with self compassion. We have to be kind to ourselves. And honestly, in the second movie, as someone who does struggle with anxiety, seeing that personified in a way that was treated so respectfully, and we really got to see how the other emotions treated anxiety and how they helped her process through that. It was really eye opening. And I think that this film, yes, it is designed for kids. I think as adults, we can take just as much away from Riley's story as any other person or any other child could. The last one that I thought about as more of a pop culture reference is Dolly Parton. If you have never heard the name Dolly Parton, I would be shocked. She, of course, is a country music icon. She's an actor, she's a philanthropist, she's a creator, she's a business owner. Everyone knows Dolly Parton. She's got 10 Grammys. She's in the Country Music Hall of Fame. She has theme parks and entertainment venues. She's been all over the world. People know who Dolly Parton is. As I dug into Dolly Parton's story more, what I found so fascinating is that I think any person can take something away from Dolly. Things like She created those theme parks and entertainment venues to create jobs for the communities that she grew up in. She wanted to bring work back to her community for the people that live there. That's incredible. She also created Dolly's Imagination Library that donates 10 million books to children annually. I know that my niece gets these books. I volunteered with this program where you take the books and you help get them shipped out. This is an amazing program to ensure that children have access to books. She's also been involved in so many other charitable ventures. Just look her up if you ever are curious of all the amazing things that she's done. Now, within that message, you could take, like I said, so many different things away, right? It could be the importance of giving back to the community. Yes, those moments of her charity and philanthropy are so important, but the message that we can take away from that is no matter what level of success that you have, it's important to be a part of those efforts in your local communities. You could also take away the hard work factor, right? She didn't get to where she is today by standing idly. She put in the hard work and the time that it takes to be successful. She's someone who, had to come up with music. She's had to develop all these different efforts in her life to get to where she is today. You could also think about the element of just being a caring human, right? When I mentioned that she brought all those jobs back to the communities, she easily could have created those ventures just as a income source for herself. But from the research that I found, the purpose really was to bring those jobs back to the community. And so I think those are the messages that we can take away. Now, I could go on forever and ever. There's a thousand people, a thousand books, a thousand movies that I could use as highlights for stories. But instead of doing that, I want to pivot now to talking about your story. What is your story? What are the things that make you unique? What should the world know about you? What do you want them to know about you? And what's that message that you want to send? As you start to think about your story, I challenge you to be authentic. This is your story, and there's no right or wrong way to tell it. Also, be bold. Sharing your story takes bravery. It takes vulnerability to share that with someone. So, my challenge to you in these last couple months of 2025 is to really think and craft your story. I want you to go into the new year feeling like you have such a sense of self, that you know your own story, that you can then start to share it with others. This time of year, I think there is so much pressure to change. We go into a new year and we see messages about New Year's resolutions and a new year, new you. And that's certainly something that I have struggled with, right? Not listening to those messages and just trying to be okay with who I am as I am. And so let's use these last 2 months to really think. Let's reflect. Let's get comfortable just being who we are as we are right now. And a way to do that is to think about the story of your life. Think about who you are and what it took to get to where you are today. And then you can take that story and you can use it as a guidepost as you continue forward. You can start to use it to say, what else do I want to bring into my story? What else do I want to learn? What else am I curious about? All of those things are going to help continue to add chapters to your story from here. You can also use those values to, instead of making resolutions, you can make get to lists. Instead of to do lists, it's I get to do these things because these align with my values, right? For me, one of those things in 2026 is going to be resting more. That's something I have to work more on, is taking rest for myself, but also finding those spaces of comfort, finding the spaces of love that make me feel like I can just be who I am. And I guarantee at the end of 2026, if I have done those things, my story is going to be chapters full of beautiful moments of community and people and rest and enjoyment and fulfillment. So, I'm going to leave you with this, a challenge. Craft your story. You don't even have to tell anyone your story. Sometimes it takes bravery just to develop what it is. Write those things down that have made you who you are. Explore your values and dive into them a little bit deeper. And if you are feeling brave, find one safe person in your life to share your story with. Tell them, this is who I am, this is how I want to show up. Then from there, as we wrap up our year, I challenge you to just embrace that story. Don't feel like you have to change it. Don't feel like you have to start fresh come a new year. Just be grateful for those beautiful moments that have made up your life and be grateful for the moments that are still to come. If you are feeling like there's not enough chapters in your story yet, I promise you there are so many more that are coming your way. And I'm excited to continue to bring you stories of other people through this podcast. As you write your story, if you discover that you have a story you want to tell, please reach out to me. I would love to give you the platform to share your story with the world. Thank you for being a faithful listener and tuning in to the Boldest You month after month. I'm excited for this holiday season and can't wait for December to talk a little bit more about the Christmas season and just the things that we enjoy about that time of year. And with that, I wish you a wonderful November. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.